I stopped buying this. I made my own ham with no preservatives, soft English muffin from scratch, and shortbread cookies you can keep in the fridge and slice when you need. And this pasta, it might be the best thing I've made all week. Honestly, homemade just tastes better. And bonus, it saves money too. Come into my kitchen as I share all these recipes with you. You know that spring is here when you go outside and see everything covered in yellow dust, also known as pollen. So to keep my allergies in check, I prefer to spend a little bit more time inside and especially in my kitchen. While my kids started to work on their schoolwork, I decided to make English muffins from scratch. I have made them before. They're loved very much in my house, and I'm dying to share this recipe with you. And let me quickly just say this. Once you try homemade English muffins, you'll never want to buy store-bought again. I give you my word. I start out by mixing all my dry ingredients in the bowl first. And I start out with measuring out 2 3/4 cups of flour. Then I add 2 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. And if you're in the US, it's just like one little packet of yeast that you can buy at the grocery store. Then 1 teaspoon of salt and 2 tablespoons of sugar. Once I mix everything up, I set my bowl to the side and move on to mixing all my wet ingredients. I add 3/4 cup of milk in the pot and warm it up just until it's warm to the touch. You do not want it to be hot because it will kill your yeast. Then I add 1 large egg, and you want it to be room temperature. So if I did not lay my egg out ahead of the time, I just put it in the warm water for about 10 minutes and let it just kind of warm up that way. Then I'm going to add 1/2 cup of water. You also want your water to be warm, not hot, because again, it will kill your yeast. I use the same pot then to melt 3 tablespoons of butter, and you want your butter also not to be scorching hot. So usually what I do, once I see that my butter is starting to melt, I use whisk, or you can use a fork, and just kind of help my butter by moving it around to melt a little bit quicker, so that way it doesn't get too hot. Once all my wet ingredients have been added to the mixing bowl, I then add my dry ingredients. I let the mixer do all the hard work, and it's supposed to mix for quite a bit, about maybe 10 minutes, because you want your dough to be elastic. You can see when everything's gonna start come together and your dough no longer sticks to the side or the bottom of the bowl. You can perform a stretch test, and you'll see that your dough you can see the light through it, and your dough does not tear. You know that the dough is ready to go. Once the dough is mixed, I cover it with a plastic wrap, and then I place it inside the oven with the door closed and let it sit there. I feel like the sweet spot for me is 1.5 hours. 1.5 hours, as I mentioned, is my sweet spot, but you always want to watch your dough because it's supposed to double and in some cases triple in size, and that's when you know it's ready. You want to deflate the dough, put it in a well-covered surface. I add generous amount of flour to my working surface, and then prep my pan where I will be setting my English muffins to rise the second time. But that surface need to be covered with cornmeal, so that way it will be easier for you to work and lift your English muffins once they're ready to be cooked. When shaping the muffins, you want to roll the dough to just under 1 inch thick. When handling the cutout muffins, you want to gently place them on the prepared baking sheet and be very gentle with it because you don't want to deflate them. And then you just re-roll the scraps as needed. Put it in. Good job, bud. Oh, it's stuck, it's stuck. Cover the pan loosely with a plastic wrap and let your muffins rise for about 30 minutes. When the muffins are ready to be cooked, I usually turn on my skillet. I started off with about medium heat and then just kind of watch it how quickly they cook. But because the bottom of my baking pan was so generously sprinkled with cornmeal, I do not add any more cornmeal to my pan. So you do not add any oil, nothing. You just gently place about 3 to 4 muffins in a pan, and then you want to cover with a lid so your muffins are cooked not only on the bottom but on the inside as well. Now, before flipping my English muffins, I don't always remember, but when I do remember, I also sprinkle the cornmeal on top and then flip it so that way both sides look pretty. I mean, it'll cook without it just fine, but it just looks prettier. This recipe makes 18 English muffins. My kids ate 9 of them in the first 10 minutes because they're so delicious. They're the most soft muffins that you'll ever eat. The plan for the 9 muffins that were left was to make sausage and egg breakfast muffin. After running errands, next on my to-do list was to make shortbread cookies that I can bake half of the roll that day and then put the rest of the roll in the fridge and make it later in the week. To make this shortbread pecan toffee cookies, I started out by creaming 2 cups of room temperature unsalted butter, and I added 3/4 cups of sugar. While my mixer was going, I added 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Now, I did have to pause and lift up my mixer so I can scrape the sides of the bowl because the butter was getting stuck to it, so make sure to get that done. Next to the mixer, I added 4 cups of flour and half a teaspoon of salt, and I let the mixer do all the work. And once I start seeing that my ingredients are coming together, I added 1 cup of chopped pecans and 1 cup of toffee bits. Our little man loves come helping me, and in this case, I'm pretty sure he wanted to eat some of the toffee bits instead of adding them to the batter.
It's okay.
Once the dough is done mixing, we're going to form the dough into a log about 2.5 inches wide. Now, if you want to put some in the fridge and some in the freezer, you can divide into several logs. For me, I just made one big log and I let the dough chill in the fridge for an hour. You can let it chill overnight. It doesn't matter. Just you want the dough to be cold so the cookies do not spread while baking. My sausage and egg have cooled off, so I went ahead and assembled that before moving to the next task, which was start prepping for making homemade ham. And once I show you how easy it is to make ham at home, you'll never want to buy store-bought again. We're going to roll out a piece of aluminum foil, and on top of the aluminum foil, you're gonna put 2 tablespoons of salt, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder and 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of pepper. You want to mix everything up very well and spread it out on that aluminum paper. Next, we're going to put pork loin on top of all those spices and roll it very well so all sides of the pork is covered with seasoning. Next, we're going to wrap up pork loin in plastic wrap, and you want to wrap it really well. And I also place mine in a Ziploc bag so that way as the juices come out, you don't have to clean mess in your fridge later. This pork is going to sit in the fridge and cure for 3 days, and each day you want to flip your pork so your cure is evenly distributed. Now that we're done with this task, we're moving back to the cookies. Our cookies have now sat in the fridge for about an hour, so the dough is perfect for baking. I cut cookies to about 1/4 inch thick, and you want to make sure you preheat your oven to 350, and we're going to bake for about 15 to 18 minutes. I did let mine cook for about 18 minutes, so they were a little bit more on the well done side of the cookie baking, but my family loved them so much that I ended up baking the rest of the log the following day. The next day when school was done, I started to prep for our dinner. Let me be honest with you, back when my kids were little, I used to love making pastaroni. It came in a box, just boiled the noodles, add the powder, and dinner was done. But one night, my husband looked at me as we were eating pastaroni with our meat, and he said, "This stuff can be good for us." It made me think that I probably can find a recipe to make my own pasta that would be so much better, so much cheaper, and actually good for us. For this particular pasta dish, I started out by chopping about half a package of bacon, and then I cut it up about 1 onion, and I added to the pan with the bacon bits, and then I added 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. To bring out the flavor, I also added 1 teaspoon of garlic powder and 1 teaspoon of onion powder. Once the base for my sauce is cooking, I added a package of pasta in a boiling salted water and let it cook. And then I moved on to slicing my chicken. You want to slice your chicken very thin. So for one chicken breast, I get about 3 pieces. And then we're going to pound them to make it even thinner because we're going to make chicken Schnitzel. The sauce base was ready, so I added generous amount of tomato paste. So I took a tablespoon and just scooped a big scoop. I added to the pan, and then I added 1 cup of heavy whipping cream and 1 cup of chicken broth. And I mixed everything really well together and let it sit and cook until it thickened a little bit. Once the sauce was ready, I added the noodles. I didn't add all of them because I wanted to have more of a creamier sauce, because as the noodles sit, they will absorb some of that sauce. I set my noodles to the side and moved on to cooking chicken. In a bowl with flour, I added some of my favorite seasonings, which is onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. You can add any seasoning you like. I set that bowl to the side, and in the next bowl, I added panko crumbs, and I did not measure. I just added enough that I thought I would use, and then I actually needed to add more during the cooking process. In the third bowl, I added 3 eggs and mixed them up well. So essentially, I had 3 stations, and we're going to start out with breading our chicken in flour first. Then we're going to dip that chicken in egg mixture, and then we're going to dip that chicken in breadcrumb mixture. And then we're going to fry a chicken on both sides until it is golden brown. Now, because our chicken is thin, it shouldn't take long at all for it to cook on both sides. So I really just watch the color, and then I take a knife and just cut in the middle with the first piece just to see if it's cooked all the way through. Now, you do not have to deep fry it. You can just add a little bit of oil to your pan and cook it on both sides until the sides are crispy, and then you can stick it in the oven and let it cook the rest of the way so the chicken is cooked through in the middle. Before we had kids, I was blessed to travel to Austria with the company I worked for and try authentic chicken schnitzel, and it was so delicious. And once in a while I remember that it's so easy to make it at home, so I try to recreate it from time to time. I have a few picky eaters in my family, but let me tell you, with this meal, nobody complains. Everybody absolutely loves it, and it truly is so good and inexpensive to make at home. My husband took a few days off from work, and we came to a farmhouse on Wednesday, and so I brought my pork loin with me because it still needed to cure another day in the fridge before baking. So in the morning, I unwrapped my pork loin and I washed all the seasoning off of it. I used paper towel to dry it really well so there's no moisture and no water sitting on it. And I had to sniff it to see what it smells like. Then I added a little bit of oil to my cast iron pan, and I made sure that my pan was hot. And then I seared my pork loin on all sides. So we sear meat for several reasons. One, it locks in that flavor. We also sear it because it adds to the texture and it creates beautiful color. Because nobody wants to look at a pale gray pork loin when it's done baking. Next, I used aluminum foil to wrap it up really well, and I actually double wrapped because I didn't want any juices to come out while my pork loin is baking. I then put it in the oven to bake at 300 for 2 hours. Well, here's the kicker. I should have checked on my pork loin after about an hour and a half of baking, because you want your temperature to be about 155 to 160 Fahrenheit or 68 to 71 Celsius. Mine was overdone, and my thermometer was registering at 90 Celsius. But I was trying to be optimistic and hope that I did not ruin all this effort in making homemade ham. Once my ham was completely cooled, I placed it in a Ziploc baggie and stuck it in the fridge overnight. That's very crucial for you to do that. So the next morning, I pulled my pork loin out, and I was so relieved when I saw that it was not awfully dry, that it was slicing beautifully, and it looks like ham. Now, the reason you see that my ham is pale color is because we did not add any nitrate. This is what store-bought ham uses in order to preserve and add shelf life. So this is it, my friends. I hope you feel inspired to get in the kitchen and make homemade meals from scratch, and I will see you on the next page.